Welcome to Don't Fear the Weight podcast with your host Vicky Masita, bringing together science and personal experience.
Hi guys, welcome to episode 6 of the Don't Fear the Weight podcast. I am your host Vicky Masita, and today we're going to be talking a lot about strength and conditioning, not just for the power athlete, but for everybody in general. So my special guest today is Nick Grantham, who is a published author of the Strength and Conditioning Bible. He has done many talks at BodyPower. I don't know if any of you saw him last year, I certainly did. And he's got a wealth of knowledge to give to you today. So without further ado, let's get on to the podcast. Hi Nick. How are you?
I'm very well, Vicky. Good to be here, and thanks for inviting me on to come and speak.
No worries, thank you. So if anybody doesn't know who you are, just give us a bit of a background of who you are, where you come from, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people probably won't know who I am. Although I've got a social media presence, it's probably not. I'm not a professional social media person and blogger. I tend to spend a lot of my time working in the shadows with high-performance athletes and sports teams. So sometimes that makes it a little bit difficult to talk about what you're doing because you're working at the sort of lead end. So I think I might be a fairly well-kept secret in the world of health and fitness and wider health and fitness. But yeah, I've been working in performance sport for the last 20 years now. First started with British gymnastics as a sports scientist, and then moved through into a range of sports. I've worked across, in the last 20 years, 35 different sports, supported athletes at 4 Olympic Games, 2 Commonwealth Games, been very fortunate to work with world, Olympic, European medalists, Commonwealth medalists, able-bodied, Paralympic athletes, old, young, team sports, and I've also worked a lot with general populations. So for a number of years here in Newcastle, I ran a private training facility where not only was I working with recreational and sort of high-level athletes, I also combined that with working with the man and woman on the street, and that kind of was the fuel to write the book.
Right, okay, cool. So now I've actually got a copy of your book and I've read it cover to cover a number of times, and it's actually helped me really periodise my training. So let's talk about that. So what really spurred you on to do that book? So
in 2007, I decided to move away from the English Institute of Sport. I'd always worked in pro sport for family reasons. We relocated back up to the northeast where my wife's family were from, and as well as working in sport, I was supplementing my income working with general population and running a private facility. And to be really honest, I was quite nervous because I'd only ever worked with athletes. And whilst I was confident that I was a good coach and that I could get results with athletes, doing that with members of the general population, I wasn't sure, in all honesty, whether I could do that. And very quickly what I realised was actually the principles that you apply with athletes are exactly the same as the principles that you apply with anybody you work with, general population, high performance athletes. It's just a case of those are universal principles. It's just a matter of the degree and the level of intensity that you're then going to work at. So it was probably right at the very beginning, this was about 2007, training was still very much big box gyms. Everybody going to sort of your Globo gym, machine-based weights. Many of the clients would come to me and, female clients would say, I'm not going to do man weights. I don't want to be in there with these guys. I didn't even know man weights existed. No. But talking about it with dumbbells and barbells. And we were still in that era of quite patronising, really, that if you're a female, you'd lift powder blue dumbbells and powder pink weights, and you wouldn't be on the free weight section. You'd just be doing classes. And I'd worked with female athletes who were phenomenally strong and powerful, and not only that, aesthetically, they looked fantastic. So I was seeing in the general fitness profession a lot of misinformation and misconceptions based on hearsay and folklore and old information. What women should do, we should do like really high reps and low weight, lots of cardio stuff, and we shouldn't lift heavy weights that will get massive. And if you understand anything about human physiology, trying to get a female massive is really difficult.
Absolutely. I've been trying for 3 years.
Yeah, I had a female client say, well, Nick, if I start doing weights, I get really big arms in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, we need to get you to some scientific study because you're not normal.
Yeah.
So I was in and around private facilities, and I just felt people were being shortchanged. My wife would train at a private facility. I had friends asking me questions. I just thought some of the information you're coming out with and being told by qualified trainers is just terrible. And I'm always of the opinion, well, I can sit back and moan and bitch and throw stones at people, which some people like to do that, especially on social media, or I could put my money where my mouth is and try and make some sort of difference. So I used to give workshops and do free seminars to clients and at the gym and at different places, and there was definitely a need for it. So I just thought, look, I think this is a really interesting topic. Strength and conditioning was becoming more and more popular. People were curious about what it was and how it could impact on their performance, which was great. But then you also saw people moving away from machines and doing free weights and whole body exercises with no real understanding of technique and out of structure. So whilst it was fantastic, they were embracing more athletic type training, it was also making me a bit nervous, like, you don't really know what you're doing. So I set about writing a book that my father-in-law, my mother-in-law could pick up, my friends could pick up, and it wasn't really written for my peer group. It wasn't written for coaches, although I've been surprised at how many coaches and aspiring S&C coaches and trainers have picked it up and said, oh, we've got loads from it. I wanted to write it so it could sit on a coffee table at home, and anybody, not even with any sort of real understanding of science, could understand it. So I try and talk in pictures. I try and talk about analogies with Russian dolls and spinning plates and sorts of things, because there's loads of real scientific journals that you can read and books, but that's not what you want. You want a workout that you can do really quickly, but also some people want to understand the nuts and bolts behind the workout in an easy way, and that's what I try to set out to do.
Yeah. And it's a really good read as well. It's a dead easy read. I'll tell you, I mean, I actually downloaded it onto my Kindle and I read it on holiday. So that was my relaxation education, and it was really interesting to see. So just having a look then at the general population, how would you say that actual strength and conditioning benefits the general population? Because I'm still in the position where I'm trying to make women understand that by lifting weights, it is so much better for them. They'll obviously look a lot better aesthetically, like you were mentioning, but trying to get them off the damn cross trainer is really, really difficult. So let's try and break that down a little bit into your book and say, why should the general population start strength and conditioning training?
I think we, as a population, although we've got sort of massive levels of inactivity, I think people are becoming more interested in training and are also realising that, going to a big box gym and just going around a bunch of exercises on a pieces of kit, actually we want something a little bit more stimulating. We want something that's a little bit more interesting to do, which is why you see the rise of boot camps. I used to call it circuit training, but it's boot camps. Why you see the interest in things like CrossFit and those sorts of activities, and you see people now challenging themselves in fitness challenges like Tough Mudder and obstacle course races and charity 10Ks. So I think whilst we still do have issues with fitness, there's a lot of people are wanting to be more active and challenge themselves more and physically prepare properly for those activities. So sitting on a machine or running on a treadmill or a static bike is, I'm trying to think who came up with the term, but someone talked about it being proprioceptively starving. I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're sitting in, there's nothing wrong with machines as such, depends on what you're trying to train for.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time you're sat down in something that's been designed to fit around pretty much the average body. So if you're not the average body, if you're short or tall, you're going to be either cramming yourself in, or even if you can adjust the seat a little bit, it's not quite right. And you don't really have to work. You work the muscles that are being targeted, but everything else can kind of shut down and go to sleep. So, if you want to train in a more efficient and effective manner, using free weights, barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, bands, whatever it is you want to do, your body weight, when you do those exercises, you can't really just go through the motions. If you've got a bar on your back or you're holding a kettlebell at your chest for goblet squats, you've actually got to engage and think about what you're doing. So it's a far more challenging activity. And then because the movements will be more closely related to the types of activities you're then going to do, whether it's running for the bus, playing in the park, running a 10K, completing a Tough Mudder, because those movements are more closely related, the strength gains that you get there are going to have more likelihood of transferring across to a performance outcome. I think it's just we are as a nation really time poor. So we don't have as much time. We've got lots of busy jobs, lifestyles, families. So, if we can find a really efficient way of training, and free weights, strength training, power training is a really efficient way of training, then why wouldn't you use it? And then if we think about certain subgroups, so female individuals, so boys and girls, in terms of their maturation, they kind of follow the same line up until about puberty, and then once you get to puberty, there's a divergence, and that's because of secondary sexual characteristics, changes in body type, and anatomy. And we know that, for instance, injury reduction strategies, if you are a female taking part in any sort of sport, you are at a higher risk of picking up knee injuries because of the way the hips are shaped. So there's a thing called a Q angle. Basically, your hips are wider, comes in, so it can place additional stress on the knee. So doing work that actually strengthens the supporting structures, the muscles and the ligaments and the tendons around that knee, is going to have a protective benefit. Putting lean muscle mass on through strength and power work increases metabolism, which is great. So that will help increase your lean muscle mass. We know that females have a higher percentage fat typically than their male counterparts. It's because of secondary sexual characteristics, which is needed for childbirth and so on. So I think really important, upper body anatomy. Shoulders tend to be smaller, so that tends to be why sometimes females find it harder to do upper body activities. So actually you need to find a way of packing on some muscle onto the upper body. I think there's loads of reasons basically why I think it's a really good idea for men, women, children to do some strength work. We can think about osteoporosis with elderly, in terms of improving bone mineral density, mood state, so the release of hormones to increase mood. There's a ton of stuff out there why you should do it. I think what you find is you're often combating the myths and what someone said down the pub and what we've read in the paper. Particularly with females, it's been very difficult over many years to have positive role models. It's only until 2012 that women had parity at the Olympic sports, so that men and women did all the same events. Up until recent history, we felt that women couldn't do marathons because they'd die, which is ridiculous. So whole generations have not had positive female role models. I think it's starting to change now, with the success of female athletes demonstrating their physical prowess, and also aesthetically as a side effect of that, how that changes the body, has been really positive. And things like CrossFit, a lot of people go hard on CrossFit and say how bad it is, and there are things that I do take issue with, but it's introduced women to strength training, and it's shown lots of women that actually it's okay to put a bar on your back and lift, and you're not going to turn into a guy. You're going to have, you're not only going to be strong and powerful and confident, but actually you're going to look amazing as well. And I think that, the same with children. When I work with young athletes, a lot is said about causing injuries, stunting growth. It's dangerous. It's absolute rubbish. If you look at the actual research, that's historical data when there was poor technique, poor supervision, inappropriate load selection, fatigue. If it's done properly with good coaches, under supervision, strength and power training is really beneficial for young children in terms of teaching them movement competencies, developing their physical fitness and strength levels. So, yeah, I just see positives for any sort of subpopulation to get in and start doing strength and power work.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, let's play devil's advocate and look at negatives then, because I hear a lot in the, not so much in the powerlifting world, but in the bodybuilding world, because they're two completely different things.
Yeah.
If you do deadlifts and then do squats and then do bench press, you're going to fry your central nervous system.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that? Because I'm very dubious about, I mean, I'm a registered nurse as well, and I know how difficult it is to quote unquote fry a central nervous system. So what's your take on multiple big lifts throughout a week?
So I guess it all comes down to the intensity at which you're performing those activities and the loads that you're lifting. So if you are at a low rep range, big heavy lifts, there will be a neural drive and a significant demand, and we do think that you probably need slightly longer to recover from those big structural lifts that are training more neural adaptations, so maybe 48 to 72 hours. I mean, trying to get into the neural physiology of it, I wouldn't. Yeah, in terms of like you'd fry it and you'd wreck it. Again, I think it just depends on what level you're training at and who you're working with. But the big structural lifts are really important. I think if you go back historically, the bodybuilders of old were performing those types of activities. Equally, you need isolation exercises as well, and they'll still create a neural drive as well. I think there's still going to be neural overload with those, as well as a cellular metabolic drive that's taking place, and more structural changes at a cellular level. Yeah.
So are you more of the mindset of that there's no such thing realistically as like an overtraining, but more of an under-recovery then?
So overtraining is really interesting, and it probably falls in. So people will tell you they're overtraining, and more often than not, they're not. They just had a hard week or a couple of weeks. So when I work with athletes, we talk about functional overreaching, non-functional overreaching, and then overtraining. So functional overreaching is the normal training process. We need to bury ourselves a little bit to be fatigued, to get the adaptations that we're then looking for, and we allow ourselves recovery to come back out up the other side. So I've just been training this morning, so I'm feeling a little bit tired and sorry for myself. But if I have a rest this afternoon and eat well and sleep well, I'll come back out ready to go again. That's functional overreaching. Now, if I continue to train every single day this week for 3 or 4 weeks, I'm probably going to be pretty grouchy and grumpy at the end of it, feel fatigued, might come down with some little upper respiratory tract infection, something like that, a bit run down. Now we're getting into non-functional overreaching. We're training hard, but we're not actually getting the positive adaptations that we're seeking from training. And that's often the situation that people are in when they say, oh, I've been overtrained. So non-functional overreaching is a problem. Sometimes with athletes, we want to put them into that state for a very short period of time, maybe in a training camp, and then give them a long time to come out and recover, and they'll get a big kickback. But it's quite a risky strategy. Overtraining, you've got to be a really bad at your job, basically, as an athlete, because essentially overtraining is when you have had probably high volumes, high intensities of training over extended periods of times, months and years, and you've not been able to recover. And often you get people coming down with things like chronic fatigue syndrome, glandular fever, those types of immune function issues. And that can be career ending. It can. I've seen athletes who have been overtrained and just have never quite come back to their peak. They've come back to being great athletes, but just never quite got back to their sort of podium status. So, that can take months and years to recover from. So I often wonder if most people aren't overtrained. They're usually just a bit of a hole and non-functional overreaching. I think what you do see, certainly with the general population, which gets ignored a lot, is everyone's holding down tough jobs, might have a young family, sleep deprived, all these issues, not eating well. working 60 hours a week, and they're going to the gym, and the trainer, in their wisdom, is smashing them in the gym because I'm only going to see you twice this week. And it's like you're just adding to the load. So Hans Selye developed the general adaptation syndrome, which we've used as physical stress, but it also looks at other stress, environmental stress, mental fatigue, emotional fatigue. I think lots of trainers don't take into account and don't have the empathy of what's going on with their clients outside of that 1 hour that they see them. And I used to sometimes get clients come in to train, and I'd look at them and I'd ask them some simple questions. And I'd say, do you know what? Go home. I'll see you later. You need to go home and rest. Or if they didn't want to do that, we do maybe some flexibility, some mobility. We try and wind the system back down. But often we feel as trainers, it's our job just to smash people.
Yeah.
Just add load, and then you're not going to get the adaptations you're looking for.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so let's get on to the conditioning aspect. I was really interested about what you said about having kids do some more power and strength-based things. My son's a little athlete. He's a gymnast and he's part of the British.
It's got genetics from your husband, you see. So.
Yes, it certainly does. Everybody says that. Nothing about my genetics, but it's all him.
I only know Scott, so that's all I can comment on.
That's it. So Dee's a little athlete, and the one thing that I obviously try and do for him is do his nutrition, because he's absolutely rubbish at eating. But the guy's shredded. He's 8 years old. He's got an 8-pack. He's got delts to die for already. And if he just ate a little bit more, he'd look aesthetically pleasing. However, I do get a lot of stick because of the way that he looks. But he has been training since he was 2.5. And he's been doing a lot of body movements and a lot of quote-unquote conditioning for him. So can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of conditioning realms that you go in, not just with athletes, but with children and in the gymnastics area that you did do previously, and with the Gen Pop client as well?
I mean, wow, if you go to a rec gym and just look at the kids, if they're walking around the top, kids are like little, they look phenomenal.
They do, don't they? It's mad.
They're lean, and I think it's society's what society deems to be normal. Actually, probably is sometimes abnormal. I went to a great presentation probably about 10 years ago by Asker Ukendrop at Birmingham University. It was his professorial talk, and he was discussing Tour de France and the calorie intake and the amount of training they had to do, and he was tracking it back through the decades, and we view that level of work as being just crazy. Oh my God, they cycle for 21 days, they do this. It's nuts. And he said, actually, if you go back through history and look at how physical life was hundreds of years ago, Tour de France doesn't even come close.
Yeah.
And we are ultimately, as human beings, we're lazy. We will default back to the easiest way. That's why we've made cars and planes to make life easy, so we don't have to walk places. We make escalators so we don't have to go upstairs, lifts. So ultimately, given the chance, we'll default back to being lazy. So I think when you see young children out being very active, going to multiple sports clubs, training, it's like, oh, you're a pushy parent, or you're making them do too much. Now, that does happen. I've come across lots of pushy parents in my time, and you can see the kid isn't enjoying what they're doing. They're there because mum and dad want them to be a mini football star or whatever. But actually, often left to their own devices, kids, if they get a chance to run around, play outside in the park, play outside in their garden. Joe, my little lad who's 5, between 4 and 5, he went to the local rec gym on a Sunday morning. They just put all the kit out. I'd supervise him as parents. And they just run, they jump, they fall off, they swing, they crawl, they bash themselves, but nothing bad happens. They're just very physically active. And the side effects of that physical activity, I'm sure with your young son, you're not trying to develop a 6-pack. You're not trying to develop biceps and triceps. It's just a natural side effect of probably eating well, having a sensible diet, and being very active throughout the week. And that's probably normal. I've got friends and colleagues whose kids are super active, and come the summer, the top comes, and you're like, wow, look at this. Geez, he's got a 6-pack. And it's not because the parents are, it's just they're little young dynamos that are running around all day long and not stopping. And that's now being seen to be unusual and not the norm. And the norm is for children to be more sedentary, sitting on the computers, on the phones, not active. And I just think maybe our view of what is normal is skewed a bit.
Yeah. So the conditioning side of things that you can do with children then, just as like maybe a bit of advice for it, apart from saying just let kids be kids, because like you just said, you know, my kids run around and tear ass all over the place. But in the gym, Dayan obviously does work very, very hard, and he does do conditioning, but he does fun conditioning. So what kind of fun conditioning that would you suggest for kids to do, for example, to help functional movement?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is it does have to be fun. I think adults try and impose adult programs on youngsters, and that's just not going to work. Yeah. So listen, kids should be able to handle their body weight. Okay, they should be able to hop, skip, jump, crawl, run, swing, climb, all those things which you would have done as a youngster. Okay, now I understand the changes in society that means that you can't do that. My son, when he used to go, the one thing he wanted to go on was the rope, and he wanted to swing on the rope up and down the aero track and fall off, and that was his thing. But to be able to do that, you've got to be able to hold yourself up and pull yourself up. So I think, you know, things that parents can do is just even going down to the local park and within the park creating a race. You know, so often we'll say to Joe, okay, see how quickly you can get around all the apparatus. Time you. And I'm not forcing him to do that. He'll go and do it, and then he get, what did I do? Oh, that's 30 seconds. I can do it quicker, Dad. And he'll go again and just keep going until I get bored of him doing it. I'm not cracking a whip and saying you've got to be doing X amount of push-ups, but I think if you can get your children to be able to do just fundamental movements, squat patterns, lunge patterns, pushing, pulling, jumping, hopping, research is coming out from around the world that's showing that children are slower than they've ever been, they're weaker than they've ever been. The research in Australia is showing that basic locomotive skills are lacking in boys and girls at school age. Basic manipulation, ball handling skills, kicking, throwing, catching are missing. And I think often it's because often the opportunities aren't there at school, and often the parents, the iPad's easier.
Yeah.
This is the perfect babysitter. Let's just put in front of that and babysit that. Whereas, really, you know, I know it's difficult. I live in Newcastle, so it's freaking always cold up here. But when Joe wants to go outside, okay, you get rugged up. You put all your stuff on and you go outside, and it's far too easy to say, well, let's put a DVD on and let's sit you in front of that and watch it. Let's get them out active. Even just going for a walk, going for a walk up and down through the forest. I just think we've probably forgotten what to do with our kids.
Yeah, and it's a sad state of affairs to say that, really, isn't it? But it is absolutely true. And I think that's the same kind of advice that we can give to just adults as well, not just kids. Just get up and start moving around. And
just get up and move.
Yeah.
And you'll see improvements in your health. You know, going for a daily walk is really important. Just to, firstly, to clear your mind, but then also just to basic level cardiovascular fitness, low level cardiovascular fitness, low level muscular endurance. Really important. You know, I think we just succumb to societal norms about what we should and shouldn't do at certain ages. Who says you can't go for a run when you're 80?
Yeah, exactly.
You need to have probably been doing stuff building up to that, but apparently when you get old, you just sit in a chair with your slippers and just let yourself pick up all those issues of reduction in lean muscle mass, bone mineral density dropping. You know, why can't you be active? My mum still rides her bike at 84. She's not as quick as she used to be, but, you know, 84, she gets out on her bike and goes up to the shops to see her friend and then cycles back. You know, she doesn't rely on the car all of the time.
Yeah, and that's a good place to be at. See, that's one of the things that I always love about getting active when you're older as well. I hate the phrase, a little old lady.
Yeah.
Why is it that when you become a certain age, you then all of a sudden turn into a little old lady?
Yeah.
And it's because, like you were just saying, you just kind of adapt into that, you know. Oh, well, I'm 80 now, so I am a little frail old thing. Well, if I've seen 84-year-old bodybuilders, who female bodybuilders, who are still training the elderly population in gyms and say, and how great do they look? And, it helps with their mental clarity and everything else. It's absolutely fab. So, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Okay, so go on.
I think as well as looking great, it's like body confidence is often thought about, well, the way we look, and that is important. But body confidence is about understanding that if I want to go for a run, I can go for a run. My knee's not going to hurt. If I want to pick my grandchild up, I can do that without my back throwing. The side effect is you'll probably look a little bit better as well. You'll probably look a little bit leaner and a little bit more physically robust. But body confidence is, I wrote a chapter in a colleague's book on body confidence. I said, it's not always about the outside. It's just knowing that if I want to do that, if I want to go up the stairs 2 at a time, I can do that. It's body confidence for my dad who's 84. If he wants to go for a walk for a mile, okay, it's going to take him a little bit longer than it did 10 years ago, but he can get up and go and do that without needing assistance. So I think that's the key of being physically active for as long as possible from a young age all the way through. And I think with children, just to jump in again, children is about a wide variety. Expose them to as many different sports, different activities as possible. Let them they'll decide what they want to do. Let them just play at stuff.
Yeah, that's it. And you'll actually find with children that if you do expose them like that, they'll improve a lot of coordination skills as well, regardless of whether it's football, swinging, boxing, gym, whatever. It's going to include them all around their type of skills, isn't it?
And that's where, with young children, up until puberty, and that's why boys and girls are, you can put them in the same teams and the same groups right the way through to about puberty, because at that point, their bodies haven't changed. They haven't developed the secondary sexual characteristics that you would get. So they are essentially the same, boys and girls. We label them differently and make them separate out, but they can do the same things. Strength levels will be the same, power, endurance, very, very similar. So you can train them the same way, and the adaptations in strength and power that they will get will be primarily from motor patterning and neural and learning. They won't change their shape or size. They'll just get better at coordinating movements. So why not teach them how to do a forward roll and stand up? Why not teach them how to get a dumbbell and throw it above their head and coordinate that triple extension and catch? They're not going to get massive.
No.
Then when they hit puberty and they maybe want to get a little bit bigger or go into a sport that involves falling and jumping, they'll be better prepared for it.
Yeah, I like that. It's really good. So, all right, so just coming away then from the Gen Pop stuff and having a look at the athlete side of things, what kind of research did you get yourself into in order to look at the strength and conditioning? Because obviously I know that you've been in the industry for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
But what kind of research did you do? Did you do any kind of research into velocity and power? Or was it just primarily strength training and how to set up a plan yourself?
So strength and conditioning didn't really exist as a profession when I first started, so that was 20 years ago. So I graduated as a sports scientist with exercise physiology first and foremost. So you've got the underpinning science in terms of human physiology and muscle physiology of what you need to understand there. So you do that in 4 years. And then I kind of was fortunate that I learned on the job in terms of strength and conditioning. So I took vocational qualifications with international sort of awarding bodies, the UK Strength and Conditioning Association, the National Strength and Conditioning Association in America. So a lot of the work you do is through those guys, through their courses. But then also it was just reading the journals and finding the scientific journals, speaking to the experts, going to conferences, learning from the people that have sort of been there before you that maybe are doing a lot of the research. So I tend to be much more of a practitioner. I'm on the ground delivering. So I rely on the PhD students, the doctors and the professors at university. So we create links with those guys to help answer our questions that we have with the different teams that I work at. So, we're seeing this in this sport. Can you answer why that's happening? Okay. So that's kind of how my research has evolved. And so, yeah, it really depends on what sport I'm working with. In recent years, if you're just touching on the velocity-based training that we're really interested in now, lots of training has always been based on repetition maximum and a percentage of, which is kind of fine, and that was very much a weightlifting way of doing things, because you just lifted weights all day. That's all you need to do. And you were very proficient at it. So you knew what your 1RM was really, really clearly. It was then very popular in North America because in the collegiate system, you've got hundreds of athletes coming through. So I can write down 80% of your rep max. It's this number, go and do it. I think what we're seeing now, and actually Mel Siff talked about this in the 70s, so it's not even a new thing. It's like 1970s he was talking about it. What we're seeing now is actually coach what you see in front of you and base your loading based on what you're observing as a coach in terms of the way the bar's moving, the speed of movement. And up until recently, that was done very much subjectively by me as a coach, having 20 years experience. I can watch, and when I see the bar popping off your shoulder, I've got a good idea that load, if I'm looking for absolute strength, is too heavy. It should be pinning you to the floor. What you can get now are various technologies, from very sophisticated force platforms at about £10,000 through to linear transducers at about £3,000, or pieces of kit that I use called a push band, which is basically an accelerometer, similar to what you have on your phone. You can wear it, you can attach it to different pieces of equipment, and what that looks at is the bar speed. And we know that there's a relationship between the speed of the bar and the load that you're lifting, and then also the adaptations that you're going to get. So this morning I was downstairs with the golfer I work with, and I wanted him to be lifting a bar speed of about anything above 0.75 meters per second, which puts us right in the sort of speed, strength, power area. That's what I want him for. And we can pick a weight and we can look rep by rep, is he hitting his target? So, velocity-based training is something that's new. Dan Baker in Australia is probably someone to really have a look at, and it just gives us a little bit more objectivity into the way that we would train our athletes. So we've got some numbers to back up. The numbers usually back up and confirm what you know as a coach, but it's good to have.
Yeah. I was listening to a different podcast actually done by Eric Helms, and he's just been doing some research into velocity training, which I found interesting. It's something that I don't particularly use in any of my training, but it would be interesting to figure it out for myself. Okay.
If you're training for athletic events, anything where you've got to express strength at different speeds, you need to make sure your training is appropriate. So specific adaptation to imposed demands is a fundamental principle, the SAID principle. So if we train really heavy and really slow, we're going to get good at lifting things that are really heavy, really slow.
Yeah.
If I just do body weight and move really quickly, I'm going to be great at just body weight and moving quickly, which is fine if those are your events. But if you're sort of a bit of a hybrid athlete that's doing a tough mudder, there might be a time when you've got to heave yourself up over a wall, and that's relatively strength dominant, slow controlled. There might be a time when you've got to run and then jump, so you've got to be able to express that lower body as power. So you need to make sure you train all the various strength qualities, whereas maybe powerlifting or more bodybuilding type work, the need to monitor might not be as vital as it is maybe for more athletic sports.
Right, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so the last thing I probably want to get into is just something for the general population, because I've got quite a lot of Gen Pop listeners who are interested in this particular one. If somebody doesn't want to go to a coach, so either a strength and conditioning coach or a physique coach or just a PT as normal, and they just want to set up their own program, where obviously don't give too much information away, because obviously this is all in your book, and I do suggest you just buy the book, but just briefly overview, how would you go about advising somebody to set up their own strength and conditioning plan?
Oh wow, what would we do? Let's think, without saying read the book. I think you just need to start sensibly and probably quite cautiously. It's always easier to add sessions and add exercises rather than do too much and break yourself. I would pick maybe 4 or 5 basic movements, fundamental movements. So a squat pattern is a great pattern to start with. A bodyweight squat would be great, because that's flexion extension. It's getting up and off the sofa, sitting on and off the toilet. It's fairly useful. You might then look at maybe a lunge pattern, so which again is like a step forward. So you might look at something like that. Some sort of upper body movement, push-ups, an inverse pull, so you could get a suspension trainer, something like that to hold on to, attach that to your door frame to work the back, and then also push-ups for the chest. And then you might want to look at some exercises that help you produce and absorb force, and maybe some little hops and holds. So I'd pick maybe 4 or 5 exercises. If you're new to it and just starting out, then probably start right in the middle of your rep range, anywhere between sort of 8 and 12 repetitions, multiple sets, maybe 3 to 4 sets of each. And you can just start going through that almost like a circuit, which isn't very fashionable, but it's probably a really easy way of doing it. So do your first exercise, complete 8 to 12 repetitions, give yourself a little break, maybe 60 seconds to 90 seconds, and then move on to the next one, and then the next one, and you can do that for 3 to 4 times through if you can cope with that. For me, it's just like fundamental movements. Do them well, get technically good at them. So once your technique starts to break down, stop, take a bit of time to recover, come back in. It's pretty difficult to give like super advice, but I guess pick simple movements with body weight. Any signs of significant fatigue, you need to slow down, and technique breakdown, start to take some time to rest. Because if you try and go too fast, too heavy, too much, that's when you'll get injured, and that's when it'll put you off training. Often when I see people that are getting fit to go out for runs and stuff like that, the first thing they do is they go and run like 5k, and they come back and their knees are sore, their ankle's gone, and I'm like, well, why don't you just go down to the end of the street and come back?
Yeah.
Day 1, just do that. And then day 2, go to the end of the street, a little bit around the corner, and then come back. Just build it gradually. The piece of advice I would give, if people want to get into running or any other sort of sport, make sure you're fit enough first to do the sport. So sometimes people want to run to lose weight, which is fine, but just remember you're going out running with extra weight pounding through the body. So maybe do some lower level work that isn't as hard on the body, that will help you shift the excess baggage. Maybe dial in your nutrition a bit first. So get fit first before you embark on playing five-a-side with your mates down the park.
Yeah, that's it. Just one more thing before we let everybody know where to find you and where to find your book and everything. You mentioned technique and technique breakdown. One of the biggest techniques that I've always found is really bad is the squat. Because people think that they're getting deeper in their squat, but actually their face is just getting closer to the ground. So would you say that everybody can fundamentally do a squat? Because let's face it, babies squat perfectly.
Yes. So I think nearly everyone has that capacity. Certainly one of the things that we often do, if I'm looking at someone and they a limited range, often I lie them down on the floor, and you can move their legs in and out of a squat. Right, they've got the range. What they lack is when they stand up, they've got that inability to coordinate all of the body parts. So there's some reason why they can't do it. You just have to recognise that maybe they've been sat down for extended periods of time. They've got used to squatting to a seat, essentially. Yeah. So I think everyone can squat way better than they do. You've just got to then, as a coach, find tools to allow them to be successful. So whether that's suspension trainers, holding on to that to correct the postures and allow you a little bit of stability, whether it's holding someone's hands, whether it's working partial ranges to begin with, then working on flexibility mode. There's lots of different ways of coming at it, but as you say, just trying to face plant all the time is not the way forward. You should be able to tidy up the squat technique pretty well.
Yeah, and you certainly just don't want to try your body weight squat, find that you're getting really low to the floor, and then put a bar on your back.
No, it's a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, excellent. I think that's all of the questions that I had for you. So just tell us whereabouts we can find you on social media. What are you up to this year? Are you doing BodyPower this year?
I'm not speaking at BodyPower this year. I enjoyed myself there last year. It's not really a world I inhabit, so it was fascinating for me to sort of see all the sights and and be part of it. It's unique, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm more used to sort of stadiums and football grounds and things like that. So I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed speaking about sort of the art and science of coaching. But this year I won't be back. But yeah, I tend to speak on more sort of sports related areas. But yeah, if people want to get hold of us, then it's Coach Nick G on Twitter. I'm usually sort of pointing people to good bits of research and interesting coaches that I think are good. Occasional picture of chocolate cake and stuff like that on there.
Nice.
And if you want to get hold of me on Twitter, it's 0ZERO and then 226. Probably more pictures of cake on that than there is on Twitter.
Brilliant. Is that on Instagram? Sorry, that you just said.
Yeah, Instagram. Being Instagram, it's very visual.
Yeah.
And then if people are interested in reading stuff, then nickgrantham.com is where they can pick up stuff. And the book, the Strength and Conditioning Bible, is on Amazon. So you can pick it up there on Amazon, either sort of an e-reader, Kindle, or hard copy.
Yeah, fab. Okay, excellent, Nick. Well, thanks ever so much for being part of the podcast today. I'll put all of your links at the bottom of the YouTube videos, and on the iTunes app. So if anybody wants to obviously get in touch with you, they can do. And if anybody has any questions about this podcast for Nick or myself, then obviously just put them below there, and one of us will be sure to get back in touch with you. So, very last thing then, Nick, before you go, what is the one bit of advice or the one thing that you advise everybody out there to do that you wish you would have done way back when?
As a coach, or
as a coach, or just a general human bod?
What would I wish that I'd done more? I'm trying to think.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I wish. I mean, I wish I'd known what I know about physical preparation now. Then,
yeah.
As an athlete, so. As an athlete, the reason I got into strength and conditioning and sports science was because I wanted to be better. I wanted to eat better. I wanted to be able to fight better and train more effectively. So that's really why I started reading all that stuff. I would love to dial back 25 years, me as a young taekwondo competitor, with the knowledge I've got now. So I guess the main thing is, get good sources of information. I would be mindful with general population and personal trainers and coaches. Develop a really good bullshit filter. So just because people shout the loudest and are the noisiest and their tops fall off at every given moment on Instagram, that doesn't always mean that they're the best coach.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's worth seeking out the hidden gems, the people that work in the shadows, that aren't as obvious. I'm always a little bit dubious about really shouty people, because there's not always a lot that's underneath it. So that would be my advice: is really do your homework. If you're going to work with a coach, or if you're going to take advice and do a course from someone, do your background, check them out. What are they like? Have they just appeared on the internet after a 6-week course, or have they done 10, 15 years in the trenches with actionable results that you can see?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm actually going to call this episode of the podcast talking about the bullshit filter. I really absolutely love that. Okay, brilliant. So, okay, great. So thanks very much, Nick. I'll put all of your links underneath, and we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Vicky.